I had never expected the silence of my home to feel so heavy. Nights dragged longer than they should, my husband buried in his work, always traveling, always too tired to notice me when he did return. I told myself I had chosen this life, that the loneliness was part of being married to a man so consumed by ambition. But still, there were moments when the emptiness crept in like an unwelcome guest, reminding me of everything missing. It was in one of those long stretches of absence that I began noticing the boy in the house differently, the boy who was not quite a child anymore. My husband's son, my stepson. He carried the awkward weight of youth slipping into manhood, uncertain of himself yet eager to be seen. His voice had deepened, his shoulders had broadened, but there was a softness in his eyes that betrayed inexperience. At first, it was nothing more than simple fondness when he spoke to me, a polite respect for the woman who had stepped into his father's life. Yet there were times when I caught him looking longer than he should, eyes flickering away as though guilty of being caught. And though I should have dismissed it, some part of me, a restless part buried under years of neglect, held onto it. I told myself I was imagining things, but the air between us shifted little by little. He would linger near me in the kitchen, offering to help with the smallest tasks. His laughter came too quickly at my words, his eyes searching mine for approval. Once, when I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, his breath hitched so subtly that only someone listening as closely as I was would notice. My heart beat faster than it should have. I pulled my hand away, reminding myself who I was, who he was, and what lines must never be crossed. Yet the warmth of that small, innocent touch stayed with me long after. I began comparing. I couldn't help it. Where my husband's presence felt cold, mechanical, filled with duty, the boy's presence was alive with unspoken energy. He asked questions about life, about choices, about dreams his father never cared to hear. There was curiosity in him, a hunger to understand the world and his place in it. And when his eyes met mine, wide and earnest, I felt something stir that I had not allowed myself to feel in years, seen, wanted, even admired. One evening, as we sat talking about nothing important, he hesitated before asking a question that tightened my chest. His words were uncertain, but the meaning was clear enough. He wondered aloud about love, about first experiences, about how people knew when the moment was right. I felt my breath catch. His cheeks flushed as he quickly added that his friends made it seem so easy, but for him, it was different. He wasn't sure he would ever be ready, wasn't sure if he even knew what intimacy truly meant. The innocence of his confession disarmed me. I wanted to comfort him, to reassure him that time would bring clarity, but the way he looked at me, searching, vulnerable, hopeful, made my skin prickle with heat. I should have ended the conversation there, drawing boundaries, reminding him of the roles we played. But instead, I found myself speaking softly, carefully, as though we were sharing a secret no one else could hear. The weight of the words hung between us, neither of us saying aloud what we both knew lingered beneath. When he finally looked away, embarrassed by his own honesty, I felt my pulse racing, a mix of fear and forbidden anticipation curling inside me. Something had shifted permanently, and I knew life in this house would no longer be the same. The days that followed carried an unspoken tension, like the house itself was holding its breath. I found myself replaying that conversation in my mind, the look in his eyes, the nervous tremor in his voice, and the way my own heart betrayed me by racing faster than it should have. It was wrong, I knew it with every fiber of my being, yet the memory clung to me, refusing to let go. I told myself to stay distant, to retreat into the safety of my role, but every time I tried, something small drew me back. His voice calling from another room, his laughter floating down the hallway, even the sound of his footsteps, ordinary things suddenly felt amplified, charged. One evening, he appeared at the doorway while I sat reading. There was a hesitation in his stance, as though he debated whether to enter or not. When he finally stepped closer, he asked about my day, about the book in my hands, about anything that would allow him to linger. I answered casually, but beneath my calm tone my chest throbbed with an unsteady rhythm. When he sat near me, too near, the warmth of his presence seeped into me, and I felt the edge of danger pressing closer. I should have stood, made an excuse, but instead I let him stay. His shoulder brushed mine when he leaned forward, and that single, accidental touch burned through the fabric of my restraint. He spoke again about how complicated it all felt for him, about how his friends teased him for being inexperienced, how he wondered if something was wrong with him. His honesty was raw, fragile, almost painful to hear. I wanted to tell him it was natural, that no one should rush such things, but the words tangled with feelings I shouldn't have allowed to exist. When I looked at him, really looked, I saw not just youth but a desperate need to be understood, and it stirred something reckless in me. I told him he wasn't broken, that some people were simply waiting for the right moment, the right connection. His eyes locked onto mine, and in that silence I knew he understood exactly what I had not said aloud. The air thickened between us, heavy with words unsaid. His gaze drifted to my lips, lingering just long enough to make my stomach twist with guilt and want. I shifted, creating space, but he leaned closer, his voice dropping as he whispered that sometimes he wished things were different, that he could be with someone who truly cared. My throat tightened. I should have stopped him then, ended the conversation, but instead I sat frozen, caught between fear and longing. My body betrayed me, drawn to the forbidden spark that should never have existed. When his hand brushed mine, tentative and trembling, I nearly pulled away. Nearly, but I didn't. For one fleeting heartbeat, I allowed it, feeling the warmth of his palm, the sincerity in that small, fragile gesture. My mind screamed at me to break the contact, yet my heart clung to it, hungry for something I had been denied for too long. It was only when he leaned forward, as though daring himself to close the distance, that I snapped back into myself. I pulled my hand away, my breath unsteady, my chest tight with shame. His face fell, a mixture of regret and disappointment flashing across his features. He mumbled an apology, barely audible, before retreating into the quiet of the house. I sat there in the silence, trembling, realizing how close I had come to a boundary I could never uncross. The image of his eyes, the warmth of his hand, and the yearning in his voice followed me even as I tried to push it away. I told myself it had to end, that I would build walls strong enough to resist, but deep down I already knew the truth. The walls had cracks, and he had found his way through them. The tension didn't fade, it only grew heavier with each passing day. Avoiding him proved impossible. His presence was everywhere, in the way he lingered at breakfast, the way his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking, the silence that buzzed with everything left unsaid. I told myself it was harmless, that as long as I kept my distance nothing would happen. But even as I repeated that lie, part of me knew I was only waiting for the moment when resistance would falter completely. It happened when the house was quiet, my husband gone for another stretch of work that had become our normal. The night stretched long, filled with restless thoughts and shadows that seemed to echo my own turmoil. When he appeared, hesitant but determined, I should have turned him away. I should have reminded him of who I was, of what we risked. Instead, I stayed rooted where I was, watching the way his nervousness softened into something bolder when he realized I wasn't sending him off. He spoke softly, words tumbling out in a rush, confessions he had kept bottled up. He admitted how he thought of me, how different it felt when he was near me, how he couldn't stop wondering what it might be like if he had his first real experience not with some careless girl, but with someone who saw him, someone who made him feel understood. His voice trembled, but his eyes stayed fixed on mine, waiting for my rejection, bracing for the push that never came. My chest ached with conflict, but beneath it ran a current of longing I could no longer deny. I had been untouched for so long, starved of tenderness, and in that moment, his desire felt like salvation. When I finally reached out, my hand brushing his cheek, the dam broke. His breath caught, his lips parting in disbelief before I pulled him closer. The kiss was clumsy, unsteady, but it carried the weight of months of silence and restraint. My heart pounded as if it would tear through my ribs, guilt and exhilaration colliding in a storm I couldn't escape. His hands trembled as they touched me, unsure yet eager, and for the first time I allowed myself to stop thinking, to stop resisting, to surrender to what I knew was forbidden. But the reality of first times is rarely as sweet as the fantasy. His inexperience showed in every hurried motion, every awkward attempt to please, every nervous glance to see if he was doing something wrong. The passion I had craved was tangled with clumsiness, and though part of me wanted to laugh at the innocence of it, the other part was struck by the raw truth of what we had done. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't perfect, it was messy, rushed, and filled with mistakes. Still, the intimacy of it, the crossing of a line we could never return from, left me trembling in more ways than one. After, the silence pressed down heavier than ever. He looked at me with wide, uncertain eyes, searching for reassurance, maybe even pride. I forced a small smile, though inside my chest tightened with regret. I knew what it meant, what we had risked, what we had shattered. He whispered that he had imagined it differently, that he thought it would be simple, magical. Instead, it left him confused, both ashamed and oddly proud. I stroked his hair, trying to calm him, though my own heart was in chaos. It wasn't passion that lingered afterward but the heavy truth that his first time had not gone as planned, because it was never meant to happen with me. The weight of betrayal settled over me as he drifted into a restless sleep, and I sat awake, staring into the darkness. My hands still trembled, my lips still burned, but beneath it all was the knowledge that a boundary had been shattered forever. What had been a fragile tension was now an unspoken secret binding us, dangerous and irreversible. And though I told myself I would find a way to bury it, deep down I knew the truth: nothing would ever be the same again. Morning light carried no warmth, only the sharp edge of reality. I woke with the weight of what had happened pressing down on me, heavier than any silence I had ever known. He avoided my gaze, fumbling through the kitchen with a nervous energy, spilling more than he managed to pour. His face was pale, his voice softer than usual, and though neither of us spoke about the night before, it hung between us like a shadow stretching across every corner of the house. The simple ease we once shared was gone, replaced by a secret too large to ignore. When my husband returned later that week, I felt my chest constrict with every word he spoke, every casual touch he offered. He didn't notice the way I flinched when his hand brushed mine, didn't see how his son lingered in silence, his eyes fixed on the ground. To him, life carried on as it always had. But for us, it was different now, twisted into something fragile and dangerous. The guilt gnawed at me in quiet moments, when he kissed my cheek goodbye, when he spoke proudly of his son, when he trusted me with a smile. He would never imagine the truth that sat at his own table. The boy, no, the young man, tried to hide his confusion behind small talk, but the cracks showed. He lingered near me more, as though seeking reassurance, his gaze searching mine for signs that I hadn't abandoned him after what we had done. Once, he whispered that he thought it would feel different, that he thought being close would erase his doubts, but instead he felt even more uncertain. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that the awkwardness of his first time was not unusual, but the truth was sharper: it wasn't awkward because he was inexperienced, it was awkward because it should never have happened at all. The nights grew heavier. I lay awake listening to the silence, hearing echoes of his voice, feeling the memory of his trembling hands, and wondering if I had destroyed not just my marriage but his innocence. I had wanted to believe I could separate my loneliness from my choices, that I had only stumbled once, but the truth settled in deeper with every thought: I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Even if no one else ever knew, the knowledge lived inside both of us, shaping how we moved, how we spoke, how we looked at one another. One evening, he found the courage to ask what it meant. His voice cracked when he said my name, his eyes wide with hope and fear. Did it mean something more? Was there a future hidden in the shadows of what we had shared? I felt my throat close, my heart hammering with the urge to comfort him, but I couldn't. I told him quietly, firmly, that it could never happen again. That what took place between us was a mistake, born from weakness, not from love. The hurt in his eyes nearly broke me, but I knew it was the only way to protect him, to protect us both from drowning in a secret too dark to carry forward. He turned away that night, shoulders tense, jaw tight, and I felt the finality in it. He would move on, in time, find someone his own, someone who could give him what I never should have taken. And I would remain here, beside a husband who would never know the truth, living with the silence of my betrayal. The truth lingered long after the moment passed. His first time hadn't gone as planned, not because of clumsy touches or nervous fumbling, but because it had been stolen by circumstance, wrapped in secrecy, scarred by guilt. And though I told myself that secrets could be buried, I knew in my heart this one would live with me forever. Some choices stain the soul in ways no one else can see, and this was mine to carry, silent, endless, and unforgiven.